Hello everyone! In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over how to create a crafting system in Godot 4. Before we get started, we need to go over the system that we're going to be using to remember and read recipes. In games like Minecraft, if you were to place two planks or two items in this position, it would create a stick. However, you can do it anywhere, and no matter what, as long as they are lined up properly, it will also create a stick. The most common way that people approach crafting systems is by creating an array, so 1 through 9. However, that creates the problem where you would need to record every single possible combination, which takes way too long and is very inefficient. However, we can look at a different pattern here. What if we were to have a 1 through 9 array, how can we remember that these two just need to be oriented this way? Well, you might notice that since we have this here, this is 1, 2, 3 spots away. So if we have one item, we count 1, 2, 3, 4 spots, we have another item. And this would be applicable at any position in the crafting table. So all we need to do is know the first item, the distance to every other item, and then we can have an infinite amount of combinations without any extra work. To get started, let's create a script on our main node. I've called it crafting. Let's create a few variables. One will be the recipe count. We'll preset that to 0. The recipe, which will be a dictionary, an empty one. The recipe values we set to a dictionary and variable recipes will be set to an empty dictionary. Now, our items will be a dictionary, and we can set as many of these as we want. So let's say 3 is our stick, 2 is our apple, and 1 is our. Now let's create a new function called create recipe. We will pass in a recipe and a name. Our recipe values will receive our recipe count, and this will be set to our recipe. Our recipe count will plus get 1, and our recipes with an str of our recipe will get name. We'll print out new recipe, and we will go ahead and print out recipes with our str of res. Then we will put a colon for a divider, then we will do res. Now let's create a save function. We'll call it save game. We will create a new variable called save game. This will get file access dot open the user save game dot save and file access dot write. We'll create a new variable called JSON underscore string. This will be set to JSON dot stringify our save function, which we'll create in just a second. Now save game dot store line JSON string. Let's go ahead and create that save function. This will be a save array, and this will be set to recipes, recipe values, and recipe count. And now let's return the save array. And earlier I made an error where we don't need this recipe dictionary. Let's create a function called load game. We will check if not file access dot exists our user save. So the file does not exist. We will then return. We will then grab our save game. However, this time we will be reading. Now, while save game dot get position is less than save game dot get length. Variable JSON string. We set to save game dot get line. Variable JSON we set to JSON dot new. Variable parse result we set to JSON dot parse JSON string, and we'll create a variable called node data. This will be set to JSON dot get data. Then our recipes will get node data 0. Recipe values we set to node data 1, and our recipe count will be set to node data 2. Now in our function ready, we will be loading our game. And now let's go and create our table. So node 2D, call that table. This will just be 9 buttons in a 3x3 grid. So I'll go and make those. And quickly, before you copy your buttons, make sure you add a script to it. We will just call this button and connect your button to that script. So on press, connect to button. And now you can duplicate your buttons. Now I am using buttons for this tutorial. However, you can create items that will hold the values and you can pass them into area nodes or however else you want to handle it. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to be going with buttons that hold numbers. And now over to our button script. Let's create a reference to our crafting node. Let's create a new variable called maxNum. In our ready function, we'll be setting our maxNum to crafting.items.size. This is because we want to get the size of our items list. So this will be a value of 3. Let's go and create a variable called num. This will be set to 0 by default. Then in our pressed, if num is less than maxNum, then num will plus get 1. If else, num will get 0. Then we will set our text of our button to be an str of num. And then we need to reference our table, which you have not created a script yet. So let's create a script there real quickly. Now let's go back to our button, reference that table. And let's call table.update table, which we have not set yet, but we will in just a second. Now over in our table function, let's reference our crafting. Now let's create a variable called table. This will be an array with 9 values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Create an empty dictionary called recipe. A variable items will be 0. And our first item, since again, we are recording the first item first, and then we'll get the distance between the other items. And we'll also make a variable called record. We'll set that to false for now. So this is for when we are making our recording option. Now, let's create a function called update table. We'll quickly check if we are not recording. If we are not recording, so we are reading the data, we will first set our items to 0, then reset our recipe, and our first item will be set to 0. Now for n in range, get child count. So this will loop through all of our buttons. Now let's set our table n, since we're working with the array, to int get child n. So we are just storing these values dot num. And since we are using 0 to represent a blank space in our table, we will check if table n is not equal to 0 and If it isn't, which means that we have an item there, we'll check if items is equal to 0. This is because we need to check if it's the first item. If it is, we will create a new recipe, str, with that items. We will set that to crafting dot items table n and our first item. Then we will plus get 1 to items, and then our first item will be set to n. Let's go ahead and copy over this code. Then in our else, we will be setting this. However, we will be subtracting it from n, and then items plus get 1. Now, let's go ahead and exit out of this for loop. We'll create a new one called for n in crafting dot recipe values. So we want to check if our current value is within the crafting recipe values. So basically, we have converted our input a recipe. We have converted it to our format. Then we need to check if it's in the actual file. So now we will check if str of our crafting recipe values with an str of n. We will check if this is equal to our str of our recipe. And then if they are, we can go ahead and print out crafting.recipes str of our recipe. And this will print out the name of our recipe. Now we need to create a new button called record for recording. We can put that over here somewhere. Then we also need a text field. This will be our name, so we don't have to actually enter anything, but this will be the name that we are entering for the recipe. Now heading back over to our table script, we need to pass in that name because we will need to be gathering that data when we are recording. Now let's go ahead and connect our record button to our table script. We will set record to the opposite of record. Then we will check if we are currently in not record. Then we will print new recipe. Then we will call the create recipe function that we had created in crafting earlier. So .create recipe. We will pass in that recipe and our name.text since we are setting the name of it. And now we just need to copy the first part of our record function, leaving out where we check if the value exists. We will type in else and paste that in. So now we are just reading in and passing that data. We will then record it. And now let's quickly set a custom directory by going to our project settings, typing in custom directory. Make sure that this is enabled and you can name it whatever you would like. Now, if we press play, let's create, say, a boat. And if we remember, our plank is 1. So now, if we type in boat, we place in our planks, press record, and then press stop. It will create that new recipe. Now, if we press stop and we press play, if we do the same thing again, we will do a boat. And now let's test if our system works where we can place it anywhere. So let's create a stick. We'll place one here, record that. We'll stop it, we'll refresh, and we place it over here. But if we do over here now, it'll be a stick. And if we go anywhere else, it'll also be a stick. And obviously you can mix in materials. So if I do stone pickaxe, I'll record. Our cobblestone is 2. So we'll do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And our stick is 3. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And we'll press record. And now for refresh, you'll see that we could do the same thing. And it'll be a stone pickaxe. To add more items, all you have to do is just enter in here. Let's do 4. and I'll just do diamond. And now, if we press play, let's record. We'll do diamond pickaxe. We will then max these out, record, and if we refresh, you'll see that we can still do our stone pickaxe. However, if we do diamonds instead, it will be our diamond pickaxe. All of the code and the project files will be linked in the description down below. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.